Hey everyone, welcome back to AI Diatribe. I know it's been a minute. Turns out being a college professor takes up a lot more time than I expected. Who knew, right? But I've got a good one for you today. A little bit ago, I was on a panel with Aditya Gautam. He is the machine learning tech lead at Meta. And the conversation was so good that I knew I had to have him on AI Diatribe. So I brought in my friend Matt Konwiser, who's the regional CTO at IBM, and the three of us dove into some pretty interesting stuff like infrastructure and regulation and whether AI is making us smarter or lazier. You know, light topics, things like that. So buckle up. Here we go. So we are in a very interesting time, a very interesting moment in AI. And it's interesting because you both work for companies that are very involved in AI in various respects, although your purviews tend to be in different areas. Matt, you're kind of more on the business side of things. Aditya, you're more in the actual operational, deep technical machine learning side of things, but something tells me we're going to have plenty to talk about here with plenty of crossover. So one of the first things I wanted to do, though, is give you both a little bit of time to take 30 seconds, 45 seconds, tell us a little bit about your career path, how you got to where you are. Matt, I know you've been on here before, but it never hurts to remind people how awesome you are. So why don't you go ahead and start, and then Aditya, you could go after and tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are and what your favorite color is.
So I think there's a big difference between awesome and lucky. So I'll just take lucky for right now. But
Okay.
Thank you. So for everybody that didn't hear it before, Matt Konwiser, currently with IBM. I look after everything that IBM has to deal with. So everything from quantum computing through AI, security, sustainability, the whole nine yards of it. It's been an interesting ride. Spent a lot of time in cybersecurity, a lot of time in telecom, infrastructure, fiber optics, and I started my career making cables in a thick net data center. So I've been here for a while and I've seen a lot of stuff. And for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been almost exclusively focused on AI, initially for cybersecurity and now for general purpose, especially now that generative has become so mainstream. So that's my thumbnail.
Awesome. Thanks. Aditya, your turn.
Hi everyone, I'm Aditya. I am currently working in Meta as a machine learning technical lead, and I have been worked on like a lot of stuff related to ranking, recommendation, understanding the content, user retrieval ranking, and how does the integrity work? Like how do we make sure the content is blocked and needs to be demoted, or a classification of content using LLM and discriminative technique before. So how I got into machine learning was pretty interesting thing. It was like almost a decade ago, like 2015, where I stumbled across one guest lecture from Tom Michel, who is a well-known person in machine learning, and I was super excited about how you can use Naive to kind of like classify the emails. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So after then, there was no going back. I've worked at Google for almost 3.5 years in the computer vision machine learning space. Was a founding engineer there for developing the exact recognition, but it was too early. The compute was too high, and the browser capability were comparatively low. So that didn't work out well, but it was a lot of good learning. The last 1 year, I've been like super involved into like research, like different kind of like talks, panel discussions, like AI startups, like looking into the product, advising a couple of like the startup founders, and also working a little bit more on the policy and the like understanding more like the wider aspect and the impact of this, both in US and in India. So yeah, here I am.
So let's dive a little bit into something that is really interesting and important as it relates to AI, especially recently, and that is scaling. Things are going a little crazy. There are certain companies, of which maybe some people are affiliated with, that have been making some pretty big announcements of some major investments in infrastructure. Meta is one, OpenAI is another, making preemptive purchases of GPUs and going out and reaching out and touching Oracle for, commitments as far as processing power and GPU power is concerned. So this is kind of a big deal. So how does this affect the way that enterprises actually get what they want? I mean, are they getting what they asked for? Are they getting what works? Or is there a lot of unrealistic expectation based on this computer power that's available and being harnessed by some of these frontier or foundational models? I'm curious, Aditya, if you were to talk about infrastructure out there, if you were to talk about superintelligence and working towards superintelligence, is it enough? Is this enough for us to really start having a major impact in the business world today?
Yeah. So I think the point that you brought up about scaling the infrastructure is pretty in news all the time. Before we go into that, I would want to give a little bit of snippet of like what happened in the last 3 years. So basically, there was a research done, and now like LLM has scaled pretty well. The scaling law of the compute power and that like whole diagram, the paper that came in 2021, 22 around, that actually scaled pretty well. And now we are at a plateau, especially with respect to the text modality, right? So the capability benchmark and everything is already saturated. So models are in a very good shape. There is still health insuation, another problem that is happening. But what is happening in last 1 year is that there are a lot of tooling and other kind of like a applied agentic shift that happened. Research will still go on, but the delta would be comparatively lower. It's not going to be a step change what we saw, right? So, but we are in a stage where we can productionalize it if we have the proper guardrails, like tools, security protocols, and everything out there in an enterprise setting, and if we have properly evaluated the ROS and all those things on that side. There is still a FOMO, but when it comes to the infrastructure demand is going to be huge. It is going to be so insane that we haven't thought about it. We cannot like actually put it on a paper and say. The reason why I'm saying is that like because LLMs and AI agents, like whether it's on edge, it's on cloud compute, or within a workflow in an organization, they are going to be everywhere. Eventually, they are going to be everywhere, right? Like in 1 or 2 years, they are going to mature, like the tooling is going to get better, the performance model, everything is going to get better with time. So that means whatever the task we are doing, whether we are booking an Uber or we are trying to actually like write a paper or like do a workflow in a financial industry, every edge, which was earlier traditional compute, API, database call, and everything, now is going to have an inference everywhere. So if you look at the number of inference call, that is going to get like in trillions of like at an hourly rate, right? Next year or in a couple of years. Consider that like all API call which is made right now from the HTTP endpoint and all the database, you multiply that, and that would be the number of AI inference call that would happen down the line. So these companies has already know what is going to be the implication and how this AI will proliferate in next couple of years, and everything down the line is going to be like an inference run by LLMs and AI agents. So to prepare for that, they have to get like an inference compute ready for that. Right. So, for example, even if you're not a research company and you don't want to invest in like the heavy research, AGI, and all those things, you still need a big data center to cater to that command of inference. So that's what we are seeing a big thing. And this is not a risky bet. This is a very comparatively safe bet. AGI, those things, what you're trying, 100 trillion parameters and everything, yes, it's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? So to have that demand catered and kind of like just to accommodate that demand, the data infrastructure is happening a lot, mainly on the inference side. So if you look at the graph, like the main emphasis earlier was on training in the last 3 years. Now, going forward, it will be mainly inference. You will see the new players coming up in the Cerebrus, Grok, and other thing, and they are doing incredible job in like making new chips so that like it's very inference efficient. So that will proliferate over the period of time, and there is no stopping of that. And I don't see like that's going to stop. So that justify the compute requirement what is happening at like $100 billion scales around, right? I mean, if the cloud compute right now in the databases, API, workflow, Kafka, and like batch processing, if it is like 100 billion, having 100 billion for just inference is like a fair enough estimate as per my understanding, like at a high level. So that's what I feel like on that side. And second, the enterprise value that you mentioned, yes, it will eventually come up, but like again, the enterprise has to that that adoption would happen gradually, right? Once we have more mature tool, once we have more mature like guardrails, evaluation, once we have like the insights, human in loop, and those things, that's where the reliability and robustness of production enterprise adoption will go up. And once those tools are mature, it will be eventually take off. So right now it's not in a phase. We are seeing like different kind of mixed report, like, okay, this is like failure rate, because like it's an FOMO. Like they're just like trying to get into the AI like 100% or like having a really high bar. Like it should be more like, okay, just have a 10% adoption, 20% in the workflow, then increases by 30%. Eventually in a couple of years, it might automate fully. But right now, it's just like in a gradual phase, and like with more mature tools and like whole proper safeguards and systems, it's going to proliferate, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I
So
think
let
you're
me
right.
ask you something, if I could. I don't know if you saw, but President Trump just signed a new executive order relating to energy production in the United States. I don't know if you saw this, but basically he's authorizing energy utility companies to run at 100% in the event of specific supply and demand issues. And people are attributing that to the rise in compute needs, which I think is directly related to what you just talked about. What is your opinion on that? Because we also have more efficient chip manufacturing processes that are higher energy efficiency. We have more optimized hardware for inferencing, right? We don't need H100 GPUs anymore to do effective inferencing, so we can do that on smaller scale, more energy efficient systems. So do you think we're going to see a need for that executive order to be invoked, or is Jevons paradox going to take over? And when we get this more energy efficient situation, all of that's just going to get filled in by 100-fold more people just doing 100-fold more inferencing. Where do you think that's going to go?
How did I know that Jevons paradox was going to come up in this
I mean, it
conversation?
had.
Yeah, that's what happened during the DeepSeek movement, right? Like the whole thing was like, oh, whether it's going to get up or down. So people were betting like and using the same paradox on their side. I think what you bring up is a really good point because like the underlying. Okay, so I think just to give an example, like consider the time where there was no automatic like engine car, like and diesels and the oil was only used in industrial processing, let's say, and then the car happened, and there is a huge demand of like the diesels and everything that kind of like come up out of that, right? As a result of that, like over the period, we see the engine has become more and more efficient, but the diesel is still used, right? Till we move to the electronic, and that will be a big leap. And it take more than a century to kind of like come to the phase where we are right now in the electric vehicles, right? So I think the same thing would happen that because fundamental unit economics of LLM inference and like the cost providers, what you are passing to the end customer would be down the line would come up to these components like what is the data center cost, what is the fixed cost which might be fixed, but like what is the compute and the energy requirement for each inference done for each devices. So devices are going to get efficient for sure, but it cannot come to the point where you are actually using very little to no energy or kind of like the requirement of that. So like the need for the energy is going to get a skyrocket. We might not have that much of like a capacity right now because if you look at the total number of like the investment done in the data centers, just using the chip plus building plus like solar panels and something to make it more renewable and low cost in size and those kind of things. So I feel that like the energy demand is going to get up and up, like, and we have to go with the renewal. And if you look at the Google data centers and report that they have already done like 95 to 99% of like almost 100% of the data centers are auto renewable. Like so that's a very efficient model. That's what I feel should be like going down the line. Yeah.
It's going to be
So
interesting to see
sustainable
what
energy.
happens because, yeah, sustainable energy. And we are not tied to the transformer model. I mean, I made a post on this where Liquid AI and, their Liquid foundational model is just amazing. I don't know if you guys have played around with that at all. I downloaded the latest LFM2 locally on LM Studio, and it's blazing fast and blazing capable at such a small size. And so that in and of itself is going to reduce power consumption. Matt, you raise a really, really good point. The innovation is going to continue to make models so that they are much more efficient. It's going to take less energy. But I think you're right in that the paradox states that extra capacity is going to be used up simply because of the increased utility of what it is that's being developed. We definitely have to call that out. But then this also raises a really good point. Is there alignment or is there disconnect between what enterprises are actually implementing and what frontier research companies are trying to build and implement themselves? I mean, at one point, all of this infrastructure build has to get utilized. Are we ever going to get to a point where this is going to pay off for companies in a major way? Matt, what are your thoughts?
So it's funny. I wrote about this just a few days ago in a very similar analogy. I sleep horribly in hotels. I can't do it. And I was in a hotel this entire week in Ohio, and I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and I went for a walk. And Columbus is beautiful. There's a nice river. There's bridges you can walk over, beautiful architecture. And it's a very safe city. It's very clean. It's very quiet. And I used to be a semi-professional photographer. I used to do gallery shows and stuff like that. So I have a good appreciation for lighting and shadows and framing. And I was walking around, and I specifically walked to a side of the river that faced east, but I was on the opposite side of the river. I was on the west side of the river, so I could see the sun coming up. And there's 3 stages to twilight. A lot of people don't know this, but there's astronomical, there's nautical, and there's civil twilight. Did you know about this?
I didn't know. No, I'm not that smart.
So here's the cool thing. Astronomical twilight is when the sun is 12 degrees below horizon. It's basically pitch black. It's nighttime, but the sun is within that range. Now, once it gets to nautical twilight, it illuminates the horizon line, just barely in contrast to the sky. And it's called nautical because when you're at sea and you're looking out at the horizon, you can start to differentiate the ocean from the sky. It's just bright enough to be able to see that. Civil twilight is what most of us know. It's when, the sky starts to turn shades of colors and, the clouds light up if there's clouds in the sky, and you can start to see without assistance. And then you get sunrise. Now, what I think, and this is what I wrote about as I was out there taking pictures and being cold and wondering why I'm up at 3:30 in the morning, I was looking around and I was realizing that's where we are with AI. That's what's happening, right? So pre-GPT-3, we were in astronomical twilight. It was there, but most people couldn't detect it, didn't know it, weren't using it. And if they were, it was very complicated. GPT-3 started to shed light on things. It allowed people to see the horizon line and said, well, my goodness, there's something there. And this is big. Like this is significant. But we're not at the sunrise yet. And I think what you were talking about with the other models, and the other one is, I think China just announced a new trillion parameter model that's open source that you can download, right? So we're starting to see these impressive competitions, these giant commercialized models that people have up until now come to depend on. But I think the answer is not in bigger large language models. I think the answer is in a marriage of world models, language models, and quantum computing. And I think when you start to see the union of the three of those, we're going to get to the point where the sun is coming up over the horizon. That's where we're going to be. And I think that is going to also address some of the energy issues. So for example, a quantum computer consumes about 1,000 watts of energy to run. Now, if you compare that to big GPUs, it's inconsequential when you look at what a quantum computer can do with that 1,000 watts versus what a GPU can do with 1,000 watts. Same thing with world models, right? World models go to a place where LLMs cannot. And I think that businesses are starting to see that, right? They're adopting agentic, they're adopting smaller models, they're adopting more purpose-built models for discrete functions and capabilities, and then they're tying them together into networks and into story arcs. That's the way I call it stories. I don't call it use cases, because a story always has a beginning, a dramatic pause, and a conclusion. And that's really what agentic does, right? You're creating the story as a human, and then the agentic model with the controllers or the chain is playing that story out for you with the selection of different models and agents that run underneath it until you get to the exciting conclusion. And I think that businesses are rapidly reaching a point where they are realizing that they need to start telling these stories and not focus purely on the consumer model side of things. And I think that that's going to be a big breakthrough for business applications. I think that's going to change the landscape on energy consumption and usage. And I think it's going to direct how large businesses choose to train and inference models and what they choose to publish. And I think that the closer we get to that state, the more we can start to see the sun coming up over the horizon. And that's when we're going to really start to enjoy those benefits. But the sun can also cause skin problems.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of can't live without it, but it can also kill you. So you got to be kind of careful with it. And I think that AI is very similar, as kind of doom and gloom as that may sound. We need it, but we also have to be protected from it and know the safe ways to study it, use it, take advantage of it. And I think businesses are starting to see the light, if you'll excuse the awful pun, as it relates to sunrises and twilights. But
Not so awful. That's a good
It was
pun.
amazing. Yeah.
Maybe the infrastructure investment is something similar to, hey, let's make sure we have on a sunscreen before the sun actually comes up. I don't know. That's a horrible analogy.
that's governance.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Yeah.
governance. Well,
Yeah.
but let's talk a little bit. You correctly reference that companies specifically out there in the market, we're talking about doing business and are trying to find ways to utilize artificial intelligence and see the light, so to speak, as to how they can improve business processes, improve efficiencies, do things better, lower cost, higher revenue, et cetera, everything that is endemic to some sort of a capitalist market system. But now we're reaching a phase where AI skills are starting to become quite premium. And it's very interesting, especially as it relates to, I don't want to call it the AI scientific community, let's call it the AI talent pool, where suddenly you have crazy recruitment going on everywhere. Private enterprise outside of these frontier model companies are not exempt from this gold rush on AI talent. Are we training people with the right skills, though, for an AI-driven economy? We do have people that have the right skills for helping develop AI. Are these same people going to be as effective in the private space? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Do you want to start? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So basically, I think one point that you brought about the recruitment. So there is like a huge shift that is happening. Let me try to give an example specifically with like software engineers, right? I mean, if you look at 2 years back, it was just purely coding. That is the most essential bread and butter for software engineer to do. Now we have cloud and other tools which can do a much better code than a mid or a senior level engineer, like a simple coding one. So that has been completely taken up. So that means now the recruitment process you have plus the skills that you need, the coding is not going to work very well for you. So there is a shift in there. So using the AI assistant, like how you can build a system, do some other things, that's what the new, I would say, testing paradigm for the SUIs are, right? So that there is a shift happening in the skills required, even to like not only just to as to get into like something, but like to use that tools in day-to-day thing. When it comes to like the tooling in education, I think this is the space which has been kind of like pretty hot lately. So if you look at like the investment that Gemini and OpenAI have done in India, like especially with respect to teachings and like OpenAI has already came up with a study mode and all those things. So they are actually educating and trying to penetrate the market at the same time because they want that tool in their hands. It's just like Windows was giving free Windows, like even they know that like it's they're not getting any money out of it, but people are getting used to that tool, right? So that's the same strategy what they are doing, and there is a lot of investment that they are doing so that people can upgrade in the skills and like learn these tools, understand like how to use these tools, and I think the frontier models are also coming up like with the whole education and the university kind of thing, just to educate it like the people and make sure they are more comfortable with or like not just using the tool but like understanding a little bit like how to do it in the best manner. And there are like guidelines, for example, what is the best prompt engineering guideline? And actually Anthropic came up this today, I just saw it on LinkedIn, that like they came up with how to efficiently use and tune agents. So that's a big thing, because that's like in a very layman language that means a product manager can like go through it and like use that. You don't need to be a tech expert to understand like prompt, right? It's a natural language thing. So there is a lot of improvement, I think, and development happening in the space. And eventually we would be like, consider that like when the computer came for the first time, people were like, oh, how do we type? How do we actually click and all those things? So eventually they get used to it like pretty easily. Like the AI would be the same thing, that where by default we are using AI and we are not aware of it, like because the work is done or you are just like doing it on either back end or a front end on that side. So
You know, you're
yeah.
referring to kind of like a generational tech familiarity. I mean, I still have to set the VCR clock for my mom, right? But younger generations over time, and because it's there and they become more familiar with it much more rapidly. I mean, that's kind of what it feels like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think another thing is that like what I feel is that with this, our ability to actually, I mean, this is my personal take on this, that human creativity is going to go down with AI. So for example, if you take for next 5 years, every month the MRI scans of the students, like maybe test group or something, you would see that the activity which is responsible for like complex thoughts and understanding creativity and those things, that will go down, because like the students are not writing essay. When they're writing essay, they are actually putting a lot of brain. There is a lot of neural network connection going on and like network are forming to get that creativity, right? It's not out there. They are not extracting from the memory. It's not a retrieval. It's more like an more complex thing than that. So that is going down, I feel like, because and the kids 5 year down the line, or like I mean 1 month down the line, I think their processing power is going to be much lower because they are too dependent on the AI tools.
So I have a almost counterpoint to that, or
Mhm.
counter opinion to it, I should say. But let me start with the question that Jason originally asked, because I also created a little meme about this that I put out about a week ago, and it was talking about no code. And what I basically said is that if you don't have DevOps skills and you use a no code AI product, you will end up with shit on a disk.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just, you can't understand AI and understand business and not understand DevOps and expect a no-code solution to deliver what you need and do it effectively, right? That's how we're going to end up wasting all of this electricity in these data centers. If you know DevOps but don't know AI, you're going to end up with spaghetti code with a no-code offer, right? Because you're not going to understand what AI is and how it works, and you're going to ask it to do something, and it's going to create it, and you're going to run it, and it's going to be architecturally, this is sound. You're not going to look at the code because you're just going to assume that AI did it right because it works, and you're going to be in trouble. And even if you understand DevOps and AI, but you use a no-code solution, you're still getting a black box. So best case scenario, it works, it may be efficient, but you still have no idea how it works. It just seems to do its job and it doesn't have a lot of spaghetti code. So I think the job market is actually going to get stronger because as people move away from the big commercial markets, the big commercial models, move into smaller models, go into agentic design, go into the frontier models, the world models, it's going to require somebody with both DevOps and AI skills coupled with business knowledge to be able to use these things and use them in a way that it works and that it's not costing the CFO all of their budget for the year to run their data center and keep the lights on. So I do think we're going to see that change. Now, in terms of the GPT and the CT scans or the MRIs, that's very similar to what the MIT study had talked about. And this is where I diverge a little bit. So, and we talked about this, Jason, I think one of the other podcasts as well, but just as a quick refresher, I disagree with the outcome of the study because I think that the study itself forced a lack of creativity and knowledge, even for the people that were writing, because it gave everybody the same question. It gave everybody the same answer to the question. It gave them exactly 20 minutes to come up with a formulated response. If I'm given those constraints and then given GPT, I'm going to use GPT. If the parameters are come up with the most creative, inventive story you can think of, and one person's got a pen and paper and one person's got GPT, they're both engaging their creative centers because they have to come up with the question and the answer and then the whole plot. And then GPT does nothing more than transcribe for them or fill in the blanks, like the names of the characters or all the articles and prepositions and pronouns and adjectives and everything else. Whereas the person that's writing it on paper has 20 minutes to write down something completely from scratch with no other parameters, then come up with something interesting. If anything, the person with pen and paper is just going to get stressed out because, I mean, my handwriting, I can't even read my own handwriting half the time. I bought a Remarkable and I'm not even sure why because I can't read my notes from it. So, that's the situation that I think we're in. So I agree with you in principle that GPT can make somebody lazy, that LLMs can make people lazy, right? But I think that the high value workers that exist today, companies have labeled them as high value because they're creative and outside of the box thinkers. And I don't think a large language model is going to change that. I think the key is we have to make sure that the younger generations don't use it as a crutch to do their work for them, that we have to encourage them to continue to engage their creative juices, and it's up to us as employers to look for those traits in people that inherently aren't going to fall back on an LLM anyway, whether they have it or not. They wouldn't be that type of person. So if anything, it just makes it more important that we hire the right type of people as opposed to those good people ending up becoming lazier or invoking their brain less because they get to use an LLM. That's my 2 cents.
No, what's funny is I actually did earlier today. So for those that care, we are we are recording this on Friday, September 12th in the afternoon. We are all delaying our weekend so that we can put this episode out for you guys that are listening right now. But I digress. I actually was on a panel discussion earlier this afternoon and my list of C's came up. You both are familiar with my list of C's, right? It's funny, Matt, because in the panel discussion that Aditya and I were on, we actually expanded the list. And I think that it's very applicable because the 3 that I had previously, which I'll give later, but I want to give the 2 that we came up with in this discussion, was collaboration is going to be a very important skill. And curiosity was another important skill that's going to really complement the original 3 C's that we had talked about before: creativity, communication, and critical thinking. I mean, all 5 of those are what is going to make people important. Yes.
There is another one that came up, which is consciousness.
consciousness. Elaborate. Talk about that.
No, that came up during the panel discussion, like that, like
Conscientiousness or consciousness?
consciousness.
So self-awareness. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, that's what like came up in the panel, but I was not very convinced on that answer, to be honest. So
I suppose there's merit there, especially given the lack of self-awareness that many people are experiencing these days. But I just found it really interesting because collaboration and communication, I like the idea of both of those being split apart, because just because you can communicate doesn't mean that you're going to collaborate effectively with someone. Just because you can play well with other kids doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to effectively communicate your ideas and concepts. We all know that curiosity is going to be really interesting, and that's going to drive creativity, but curiosity is the thing that's going to allow people to actually take action. We're dealing with a time where people are now starting to, if they're already in lazy mode and kicking back and letting things be taken care of themselves by other people, they're not showing a whole lot of curiosity. They're not showing a lot of initiative. They're not showing a lot of activity. That's becoming a little bit worse, because in that same discussion, Matt, which ironically was with a chief people officer of a company here in Utah today, that's one thing that she has noticed is there is a real divide starting to happen in people that are starting to become quite lazy, and they need their job defined for them. They need to be trained from soup to nuts, and then they want to repeat what it is that they've seen. They're not exactly showing a lot of creativity or initiative in improving things, in making things better, in exercising those critical thinking muscles. And so in her experience, what she's observing is that those employees that do have those skills, those critical thinking skills, those creativity skills, those ability to take those and bring those around and communicate those concepts effectively and collaborate with others, those are the things that are becoming more valuable these days in the employment market, with this expanded utilization of AI everywhere, which is causing gray matter to disappear because people are not exercising those muscles in their brains.
Yeah. And, there's actually 3 other C's I was thinking about as you guys were talking.
interesting.
I'm going to
I
write
don't
these
know.
down. Go.
Yeah. Bering, Caspian, and dead.
Okay.
I mean, they're critical to our ecosystems and our climate. I've never seen you speak this before. It is a Friday afternoon.
Yes,
I've been
it
traveling
is.
all week, a little punchy, but I mean, I was thinking about the conscious as a C, and I actually like that. I like that a lot because I think that it can embody a lot of personal ethics. It can embody a lot of decision making that we choose to do what is right versus what is possible. It is different from creativity, but it is a very human centered trait. It's one that I would argue that even if an AI was sentient, it wouldn't be conscious. And I know that I'm splitting hairs on that one a little bit,
Well,
but
can we clarify here? Are you saying consciousness or are you saying conscientiousness?
conscious, not
Interesting.
So hold on.
conscientious.
What is the
Okay.
difference between both? Sorry, Ed.
Consciousness is just simply self-awareness, or an ability to, where you are in the state of the world. If you're being conscientious, you are acting ethically. You are making sure that you are doing those
Okay.
things, and you are conscious of the fact that you are doing things in a correct and ethical way. So,
Yeah. So, like, for example, if a model is producing highly ethical responses, that doesn't mean it's conscious. That just means it was programmed to be
Do that.
conscientious,
Yeah.
right? But consciousness is the ability to make a pun out of the seas, or whatever floats your boat in that context.
present
Sorry.
company included.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a difference, and that's what I'm saying. I like that because I think that we need to continue to be very human connected and very human centric, especially as we continue to roll this out. I mean, I gave 2 different talks this week to very different audiences throughout Ohio, and we had talked about, what happens with AI in the workforce. And one of the things I introduced was Mustafa Suleiman's TED Talk last year, where he introduces the notion that we should regard AI as a new type of digital species. And one of the things I mentioned this week, again, is that if we were to regard it as that, and by the way, I fundamentally agree with his evaluation, then we still need a way of differentiating us from it. And I think that consciousness is how we do it. We look at at certain tasks, certain capabilities that exist within a business that need to be done, that there's no human right now that's doing it, or that maybe can do it, or is willing to do it, or there's not enough staff to do it anyway. And the digital species can fill those gaps without replacing the human being, because the human still needs to be responsible for acts that are purely human.
Purely creative, purely not
Mm.
repeatable.
Well,
think
I'll
is what
give
you're
you a
saying.
great example. I was in a very unfortunate situation where I was on a call where, and this is not at IBM, this was way, way years ago at a different company, but uh, there was an executive call where we were doing, unfortunately, some RAs. And they were going around the horn saying everybody's got to provide names. And this one person stood up and said, "Nope, not doing it. My team is highly valuable, and I'm not going to do anything." Right? That's a human. That's a conscious and conscientious thing to do. And the person was given 2 weeks to come back with a name or two names, and they didn't. And their executive said, "Your name is on the list now, and I'm going to pick somebody at random, and now I'm going to replace you with somebody that will give me names." And the dilemma is, did that person act more human by refusing to give a name? Now, think about what happened. If that was an AI, the AI would just do what it was told. It would pick two names. And it might just develop a standard rubric and evaluate the names based on performance that it could identify metrics on. And it would just, here's the two. A human would look at other factors. Now, the downshot of that is that human who is protecting their entire team is now no longer there to protect their team. And now their team is exposed because whoever gets put into that spot is going to look at the metrics and pick two names. So sometimes doing the right thing is not doing the right thing.
Well,
And that's a very human quality that only a human could understand. And I think that all ties into that concept, right? Is there has to be humans there, not just for the creativity, but because ultimately all of this stuff is designed to benefit humans. So who better than a human in the loop to understand that impact and be there to work with these digital species to make those kinds of decisions instead of just leaving it up to the digital species to do it for them. Just
well,
something
and
to think about.
no, it's worth consideration because what you're talking about is acting nobly or having nobility. You're talking
Responsibility.
about a conscience. Again, that goes along with the conscientiousness, but having a conscience and being able to act honorably. Honor is a distinctly human concept. You don't see much honor exhibiting itself in the animal kingdom outside of humanity. And it's not clear as to whether or not honor is something that can be taught to an artificial intelligence entity or taught outside of humanity. You're absolutely right. That's something that's a distinct human quality, which if humans are going to be, forgive this for lack of a better term, served and aided and abetted and augmented by artificial intelligence, we still have to have those elements present in our interactions and in what we're doing with artificial intelligence. So you're right. You may have very much hit the nail on the head as to why human in the loop, even when it reaches a certain point, is still going to be a very fundamental, important element in our, shall we say,
Any AI
interrelations
systems.
with artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man. Do you remember that episode?
I do not.
So these aliens land on Earth and they present this gigantic tome to the scientists who are furiously trying to decode it. And they initially decode it as to serve man. So the presumption is the aliens are welcoming them on their ship and inviting them to go to their planet and giving them food and wealth and all of these great things. And at the very end of the episode, one of the translators finally correctly decodes it and realizes it's to serve a man. It's a cookbook.
Mm-hmm.
So what
Mm.
they're actually doing is bringing people on their ship, fattening them up, and then taking them back to their planet as food. So there's a very fine line between to serve man and to serve a man, between being a supporting figure and consuming them. And I think that we can go either way with AI. If I'm being unfiltered and brutally honest, I think it could go either way.
It really could. You know, what's interesting is there's a nice parallel there. Can AI act nobly? Can AI act with honor? Can AI do things that are going to be for the benefit of humankind? We don't know. But we have this age-old same concern, right? Especially when dealing with a free market system or a free market economy. Can companies be trusted to self-regulate in this AI space to ensure the benefit of mankind, or does real accountability have to come from the outside? In
I
other
mean,
words, where does regulation fit in all of this? And do we even have time to regulate and lose our advantage in this geopolitical race to AGI and ASI? Where does regulation fit in here?
I think this is a capitalist world. People and companies do care first about their profit margin and everything comes later. So, I mean, we don't have to look like specifically AI. You can go back in time and look into the cigarette companies and like tobacco companies and everything, right? Like, I mean, the whole propaganda like they have created, and then comes like other tech companies which were doing the similar thing, but a mental detox, like a mental tobacco, or you can say that dopamine, whatever brings it. So, the when it comes to regulation, I think there is one thing the companies cannot regulate themselves. Like they might be having internal standards and policies. Okay, this is how they define, this is how their safe system should be. But the ultimate question is when they're getting this like high revenue by lowering the bar of regulations and the policies or may softening the system, which may not be ethically right, like would they make a call or not? Like it totally depends on individual and the companies. And but in a capitalistic world, I would say people just go whatever it takes to get the valuation correct and like just increase the revenue and all those things. So the underlying incentive and motive to self-regulate is not there. Right. I mean, if you put like a 200% tax on alcohol, then you would see like there is a like a the consumption is going down, people are getting more healthier and those kind of things, right? And the people do not have an incentive to get into an alcohol industry. So same thing here, companies are not going to self-regulate. And the other problem is that the legal and the policy framework, whatever the White House and NSID are coming up, they are so obsolete by the time they came out that whatever is out there, it's not even applicable anymore. Like it's useless, man. Like so there is a big disconnect between them. And when these legal frameworks and policy folks are building the law, they are bringing and taking a lot of input from the frontier companies, right? Which have their own incentives. So there is a underlying incentive mismatch in the entire ecosystem, like I would say. Not in the AI governance processes, people, they're not in the same sync, and like the underlying incentive are not correctly set up, which if set up, then probably we can say that like a regulation would work. Otherwise, I think this is not going to work because everyone has its own incentive and they are working in silos, and the laws which are out might come up, they might not be trackable in a way that, okay, I mean, so if you look at, just to give a concrete example, like the last year, I think they came up that any model which has a compute power of more than this much of flops has to report this, right? This was the report that came out from the White House. So by the time that came out, the flops reduction has like with a small language model and the quantized model has just gone so low that that is not even applicable. So the regulation and policy cannot catch up with tech, and also the underlying incentive in my understandings are different. But yeah, so that's why they're not going to self-regulate, as simple as that.
So Aditya, I've got a question for you. Have you ever ridden a motorcycle? Do you know what lane splitting is?
Mm-hmm.
Here we
Okay.
go. I know where you're going with this. Okay.
Here's my question. Did you know that the laws for lane splitting vary significantly by state and by locale? And a lot of the appropriate action of lane splitting varies based on a very specific situation.
Interesting.
So here's my
No idea.
question. As a model designer, as an AI engineer and a back-end person that really understands this stuff, how would you codify lane splitting in a self-driving motorcycle to a model?
So what do you mean by codify? Like how to?
How would you train or inference a model that can operate a motorcycle autonomously as to the nuances of lane splitting?
That's an interesting one. I could not fully understand like the analogy or like that you're trying to say. Are you trying to say that like if we have the policies and those things, how would we make sure as a developer that those policies are kind of like the constraints are made or like followed or something? Or yeah.
Yeah, so I'll give you a simpler example that is also about motor vehicles.
By the way, motor vehicle, what I did was back in India, not in US. I'm like scared by looking it out.
No,
So
that's fine. That's
I was not
and
aware of
actually
like
in
this
India,
complex.
it's even a more interesting example. Could you teach a self-driving car to operate in India
No,
around all sorts of
not possible.
non-self-driving cars?
Because there are no
Yeah,
rules in
so
regulation.
right. So I don't know if either of you have kids. Do you have kids?
Will be in next month. So
Hey,
Congratulations.
congratulations
So-
ahead of time.
So then this is very relevant to you. If a posted speed limit past an elementary school with children playing was 45 miles an hour, would you go 45 past that school if children were playing along the curb near the street? You'd probably slow down, right? Why? The governance says you don't have to.
Mhm.
There's nothing that says slow down school zone, even though it theoretically should be posted, but the speed limit says 45. So why would you slow down?
Follow the rules, and also like there is an ethical responsibility I have that. Okay, this is that area. So there are two factors. One is the enforced rule. Second is my own ethical and consciousness in a way.
But what if the enforced rule was 45-mile-an-hour speed limit?
I would still
Then
go
it's
down. So
purely up to your own personal ethics to slow
yeah,
down. There's
yeah.
nothing that says you can't. You won't get a ticket if you don't. If you hit a child, God forbid, you wouldn't necessarily be, convicted of a felony. It would be a moving violation, a motor vehicle accident, and it would be classed as an accident because you weren't operating the vehicle improperly. That wouldn't change that you would feel horrible about doing it, and it wouldn't change the fact that you would slow down anyway.
Mhm.
So that's a simpler example of the lane splitting. Now, the lane splitting one is interesting because there are a million different parameters that go into deciding to lane split at a given moment on a given roadway in a given city based on a certain situation. Now, I used to race road bikes, not motorcycles, but bicycles. And my rule of thumb was never lane split, always follow the traffic laws. I know as a cyclist, most people may not believe that I actually did follow all the traffic laws, but I did because the owner of our club told us you will not violate the rules with my name on your back. If you are wearing my name on your jersey, you will do this the right way. But one of the things we always used to do was make eye contact with every car through their rear view mirror and their side view mirror.
Mhm.
So we knew if there was somebody in a car that might open their door. We knew that whether the driver could see you or not, and we could operate our bicycle safely, and it would also help with the safe operation of the cars around us. AI can't do that. So it becomes a very complicated problem around governance to just say, follow the rules, because you can follow the rules and still do everything completely wrong. And the way you can hide behind the rules is to say, well, I followed the rules. So I didn't do anything wrong, even though you kind of did.
There's a whole additional element to this that I think is worth mentioning. Why would he slow down if he saw kids playing near the street and the speed limit's 45? Well, because he had an emotional reaction. Okay, because he noticed them and he didn't want somebody to go through the pain he would feel if his kid was hit. We're talking about artificial intelligence where emotion does not play a role here. This is yet another one of those things where maintaining the humanity in the equation could end up becoming more important than we think or even realize right now.
Yeah.
Unless you build a model that is capable of artificial EQ.
Well, I don't know. Data just doesn't have the chip yet. So,
Well, he did a few times, but he went a little nutty and then they took it out again.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Star Trek reference for those of you listening that don't know. We may have Star Wars in the background and Matt's, Lego models back there, but Star Trek is still prominent for sure.
Give it a month. Rumor is first Lego Star Trek set coming out in October, been teased. Old Lego Picard has been shown. We're hoping.
And there you have it, 500 billion in infrastructure and AI skills crisis and the debate over whether machines can ever be truly conscious. Just another day in AI. Thanks to Aditya and Matt for the conversation. If you got value from this, subscribe and share it with someone who's trying to figure out where AI is actually heading. I'm Jason Lowe. This is AI Diatribe, and we'll catch you next time.